From the shadows of secret tunnels to the cries for revolution echoing in the streets, China is reaching a violent breaking point. The facade of the Chinese dream has shattered, replaced by a landscape of economic ruin, mass poverty, and a middle class in freefall. As ancestral graves are desecrated and religious icons torn down, the people's fear has finally turned into a desperate, explosive rage. Is this the beginning of the end for the CCP's iron grip? Today, we dive deep into the 10 signs of an imminent state collapse and the growing movement to bring down a dynasty. Welcome to China Obscura. Eradicate the communist lineage. Dig up the graves of Xi Jinping's ancestors. Today, the fury of the Chinese people is erupting like a volcano. From religious suppression and forced tomb relocations to rampant corruption, years of accumulated hatred toward the CCP's barbaric crimes have transformed. What began as quiet resentment is now a thunderous roar calling for the massacre of officials, the assassination of Xi Jinping, and the overthrow of a starving dictatorship. From underground tunnel explosions suspected of targeting Xi Jinping to slogans demanding the excavation of the Xi family's ancestral plots, the signs are everywhere. Banners calling for the extermination of the CCP lineage have appeared in public restrooms and on city streets. With government offices being raided and violent clashes with police erupting, the people are rising up. As attacks grow bolder and spiral out of control, the facade of CCP stability is disintegrating. Despair has swallowed fear. The primary threat to the regime is no longer a foreign power, but the very people the CCP has oppressed for decades. A nationwide revolution against autocracy is closer than ever. As China's economic slump deepens and governance grows more suffocating in 2026, the Communist Party has entered a period of maximum internal alarm. Public resentment toward the ruling elite has simmered for years, but in the past 12 months, the frequency and intensity of confrontations have skyrocketed. The most striking change is the language of the protests. Slogans are no longer vague or metaphorical. They now openly target the CCP regime and Xi Jinping himself. Banners demanding the overthrow of the CCP, the massacre of the Xi family, and the exhumation of Xi's ancestors have surfaced in multiple provinces. Rumors of bomb threats and assassination attempts against Xi Jinping are circulating, reflecting the profound hostility embedded in society. A recent flashpoint was the CCP's opaque handling of a blast inside the G95 Beijing 7th Ring Road tunnel on December 17th. In the absence of an official explanation, various theories spread rapidly online. Some internal sources claim the explosion was part of an assassination plot against Xi Jinping. There are even claims that Xi's body double, used for high-risk missions, may have perished in the blast. Videos uploaded by netizens show the tunnel explosion sending flames and thick black smoke high into the sky. In the aftermath, the tunnel was a scene of carnage, littered with wreckage and over 20 severely damaged vehicles. Despite significant casualties, state-run media remained collectively silent. This isn't the first time assassination rumors have dogged Xi. Regardless of the veracity, these rumors reflect the people's deepest desires. In late November, thousands of villagers in Yunnan and Guizhou staged weeks of protests against the government's forced cremation policy. This spontaneous uprising by farmers lasted nearly a month. Protesters confronted officials directly, shouting, "If the CCP wants to dig up ancestral graves, start with Xi Jinping's family. Do you even dare?" Residents warned authorities that any attempt to forcibly exhume remains would be met with fierce resistance. Simultaneously, Xi's autocratic reach has extended beyond funeral customs into an aggressive assault on religious life. On December 23rd, residents of Zhongshan County, Guangxi, clashed with authorities during the forced removal of a Buddhist statue. Several residents were beaten unconscious. In mid-November, similar demolitions targeting temples and ancestral halls occurred in Hainan and Guangxi, leading to violent physical altercations. In Hunan on November 17th, a massive force of police and demolition crews was deployed to besiege a local temple. Footage shows residents risking their lives to stand against troops armed with shields and batons. As statues were forcibly dismantled, villagers responded with traditional rituals. They beat drums and threw rice at the demolition teams, a symbolic act of noble resistance rather than brute force. The scope of religious persecution is widening. Since December 13th, Thousands of police have raided Hangzhou and surrounding areas to arrest local Christians. In just 2 days, over 100 believers were detained. Additional arrests continued through late 2025 and into early 2026. Across China, religious and folk belief sites are being torn down under the pretext of correcting illegal structures. Analysts point out that a totalitarian system cannot tolerate any independent spiritual authority. Even ancestral worship or village shrines are now treated as existential threats to central power. These incidents represent only a fraction of recent unrest. According to Freedom House, protests in China heading into 2026 have increased by 45% compared to the previous year. Evidence suggests a fundamental shift in public consciousness. Resistance is evolving from narrow rights defense actions into a politically awakened opposition movement. Recently, a shocking banner appeared near a road sign by the Pingjiang police station in Hunan. It read, "Step down. Xi Jinping, end organ harvesting, end dictatorship and tyranny, and overthrow the CCP." It also included demands for freedom of speech and an end to internet censorship. The people's demands have become strikingly specific and fearless. The restroom revolution has also spread uncontrollably after a shocking conversation between Xi Jinping and Putin about living to 150 through organ transplants was leaked. Slogans have plastered the interiors of public restrooms. These messages directly target the Xi family and defy state media, attracting massive public attention. The economic downturn has pushed the CCP to its breaking point. As we enter the Lunar New Year of 2026, millions of migrant workers are returning to their villages. In response, the Ministry of Agriculture held emergency meetings to implement measures keeping these workers employed in rural areas. This is a desperate attempt to prevent massive unrest in the countryside. However, netizens argue that the youth have already seen the outside world. Analysts suggest that returning youth might secretly form anti-government organizations in rural areas. This is exactly what the government fears most. U.S. Economist Li Chung points out that due to the recession, the real estate collapse, and trade wars, jobs for migrant workers have vanished. He warns the countryside will face extreme poverty in 2026, creating a breeding ground for organized resistance. Sun Liang, a coordinator for victims of political and religious persecution, stated, "Hardly anyone believes in the CCP anymore. The people have despised them for a long time." He added that slogans calling for the overthrow of the party and Xi have persisted in Hebei, Jinan, and Guangxi. If the day comes when the people can no longer eat, nationwide uprisings will be inevitable. Current unrest in 2026 is defined by a psychological tipping point. For decades, opposition in China was fragmented and cautious. Today, slogans that were once unthinkable are used publicly. It is not that the fear has gone away, but that despair has finally outweighed the fear. Economic contraction and ideological rigidity are hollowing out the core of CCP control. History shows that regimes don't fall simply because people are unhappy. They fall when fear can no longer suppress despair. Xi Jinping's Chinese dream has become a nightmare. 10 signs now point to a middle-class collapse, mass poverty, and an imminent state breakdown. Despite promising prosperity in 2012, the reality in 2026 is the exact opposite. Currently, only 39% of the population holds a positive outlook, while 61% believe they are sliding into poverty. The material security that once underpinned social stability has crumbled. Expert Sun Guoqing analyzes that Chinese society is now battling 10 hardships. Everything from food and clothing to education, employment, marriage, housing, healthcare, and even funerals. The hardship spans from the cradle to the grave. According to Sun Guoqing, China's economy has entered an incurable crisis. He points to 10 shocking phenomena. The first being extreme wealth inequality. The socialism the party preaches is a fantasy. Official data shows 960 million people live on less than 2,000 yuan, approximate $282 per month. This accounts for 70% of the population. Conversely, the top 1% controls about 90% of national wealth. The World Bank estimates nearly 200 million people live in poverty in China, and the wealth gap between the richest and poorest households has reached a record 359 to 1. Second is the eruption of the social volcano. Research cited by the Wall Street Journal shows a fundamental shift in public attitude. Citizens are stopping blaming themselves for their poverty and instead blaming structural inequality and an unfair system. Sun Guoqing defines this as imploding social resentment, a volatile mix of personal despair and political rage. Third are the deaths of despair. A female employee at CICC committed suicide after the real estate crash made her mortgage unsustainable. A top university graduate was found starved to death in a rental apartment after being repeatedly rejected for jobs due to corruption and nepotism. These are the human costs of economic decay. Fourth is the plight of the elderly. China's population over 60 will hit 500 million by 2050. With the economy tanking in 2026, elderly care has become a crisis. Welfare systems are skewed towards CCP elites, leaving rural seniors with zero support. Fifth is the rise of the restaurant undertakers, businesses that solely exist to scavenge and resell equipment from the millions of restaurants that fail every year. By the start of 2026, the trend of restaurant closures has only intensified. Sixth is the brutal price war caused by overproduction and weak domestic demand. Profits in the steel and solar industries have been cut in half, pushing many companies into massive deficits. Seventh, flagship industries are on the brink. Despite Xi's promotion of EVs, bankruptcies are spreading. BYD's debt is nearing 600 billion yuan. In real estate, even the once stable giant bank is facing insolvency. Eighth is the collapse of the middle class, whose savings have been wiped out by the housing market crash. Ninth is the unfinished generation, millions of highly educated youth who are unemployed or underemployed. In 2026, China will produce a record number of graduates into a market where unofficial youth unemployment is estimated at over 50%. 10th is the astronomical debt. Total debt, including hidden local government liabilities, is estimated at 134 trillion yuan, nearly equal to China's entire GDP. Despite this, the CCP continues to pour resources into vanity projects like foreign aid to Africa and satellite plans. Sun Guoqing argues that the Chinese dream was never for the people, it was Xi's personal emperor's dream. While the people suffer, the party is obsessed with its theatrical displays. These 10 signs point to a structural dissolution of the entire system. The rift between propaganda and reality has become insurmountable. Recently, a letter advising Xi Jinping to resign spread rapidly online. The author criticized Xi for putting personal interest above the nation and abusing state power for private ends. The document condemned the kidnapping of Hong Kong booksellers as an example of the privatization of state power. It argued that mobilizing the national security apparatus to settle personal scores proves Xi is unfit for office. Furthermore, by abolishing term limits and fostering a cult of personality, Xi has been branded a counter-revolutionary in power. Economically, Xi is criticized for reckless market intervention and wasting trillions on vanity projects like the Belt and Road. The author also pointed to Xi's low educational level and academic fraud allegations as reasons for China's tarnished global image. His failure to take responsibility for COVID-19 and flood disasters further proves his incapacity to lead. Political commentators note that demands for Xi's resignation are becoming more frequent and direct in 2026. The cries of Xi Jinping, "Step down" during the 2022 White Paper protests, were a turning point. Although the regime suppresses these voices as subversion, the public remains cold. Many now argue that not just Xi, but the entire CCP must face a final reckoning. As society prioritizes results at any cost, hearts have frozen. Officials manipulate data, while citizens break rules to survive, leaving the honest to be treated as fools. As the economy cools in 2026, distrust and anger deepen. Where will the end of Xi Jinping and the CCP lead? A tension like a volcano before an eruption now hangs over all of China.